Okay, I think we'll get started. My name's Paul Lynch. I'm the convener for this series of open lectures. We have one every month, and so this time we have two presenters, and I'm going to introduce them to you. First of all, we have Dr. Sarah Anderson, who's a senior lecturer in the School of Education here at the University of Glasgow. Sarah is a former high school educator working with students with emotional disorders, learning disabilities, and other health impairments, as well as she taught English. Sarah served with the ND Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, and she's a Fulbright Scholar in 2011 to 2012, academic year at Roving Scholar in Norway. And her research areas include teacher appraisal for continual improvement, transition, progress monitoring for RTI, and effective instruction and interventions. Our second presenter is Dr. Yulia Nesterova, and Yulia is a lecturer in international and comparative education, and she's the co-leader of Justice, Insecurity and Fair Decision Making, ILT, at the University of Glasgow. And Yulia's research focuses on peace education, community engagement in peace building, and youth inclusive peace processes. Yulia is co-lead to develop a strategy on youth engagement in preventing violent extremism through education of a framework for Together for Peace program for Asia Pacific, both for UNESCO. She's a member of the International Working Group on Youth Peace and Security at FBA, the Swiss Agency for Peace, Security and Development, and co-chair of Peace Education SIG at CIES, which took the CIES conference, which took place last week, and you presented there. And is a trustee of Scotland's International Development Alliance. So you're very welcome, and thank you very much, both of you, for agreeing to present. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah first, who's going to start off. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for the introduction. And again, thank you to my collaboration with Yulia as the co-partner in this research project. It's a delight to be able to share that with you today and talk a little bit about the methods and how the study really evolved throughout our process over the last number of years. You probably heard a little bit through those biographies that we have a confluence of expertise in our space as we work across the social subjects and peace education, and really looking forward to talking a little bit about how we bring youth voices into that process. So here is our session outline for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the whys behind our research, why this study, some of the objectives that fueled the questions. We're going to look at the arts-based and creative methods in particular today, look at the context of our example study, the design, the analysis, the learnings that had come forward for that, and then wrap up our time today with some question and answer. So again, a little bit of background around the research that we've been engaged with. I've really taken a look at the school-based approach, what's happening in the curriculum, what does it look like to actually engage the heart, the heads, and the hands in terms of what we're looking at in social justice application in schools. It can be really in the ether sometimes when we get to the school level of what do we really mean by implementing social justice, and sometimes within the scope of, especially here in Scotland, our dialogue around civic education, we find that the specificity around peace education can actually get lost a little bit. And so we had some questions in and around those spaces and some of the dynamic ways that schools engage within that space of curriculum reform and how we're actually taking a look at implementation. So Yulia's work has been around youth engagement and peace building in particular, again, that confluence between our expertise and global citizenship, and really taking a look at how do we engage youth voice in perhaps different ways, and how does our methodology and our selection of that methodology make a difference in how we're bringing forward youth voices. So as an introduction, the title of our study was Visions of Peace, How Youth in Scotland Define Peace and Their Role in Sustaining Peace. And this in particular was spurred on by a study that was done nearly 10 years ago called the PECA Project, which actually said that Scotland effectively had a C+ when it came to peace education and curriculum. And we were really curious to take a look at why and which parts, and whether when we heard from young people, they also were sharing with us that same explanation around positive peace in particular. So our objective was to look really at this methodological potential of a structured art-based workshop instead of a literacy or reading or writing-based workshop, or using surveys as ways to engage voice, and to really offer a reflective and creative learning opportunity about socially important issues, particularly peace in this case, as well as to look towards action. So why was an arts-based or creative method really where we ended up being situated? First, we'll talk a little bit about some of that foundational research that informed our decision. It was really taking a look at how arts-based and creative ways can create a safe space for self-expression and meaning-making. And this can actually help young people to articulate their experiences and eventually result in more impactful knowledge production. We also know that when we look towards art-based methods, we find that we can actually provide greater insight into feelings and thoughts. Some of those abstract concepts will come through differently in an arts-based space than they would if we were, again, engaged in interview or survey research. So it helps to draw some of these unspoken things sometimes to the surface and allows that expression, empowerment, and then personally relevant meanings come forward. We also have found through literature that we use an arts-based approach to capture interpretations and meanings that can sometimes be overlooked in those traditional methods, capture something different than perhaps a Likert scale may do. We also find that many young people enjoy drawing without showing signs of tension, and we want to make sure that we can eliminate those tensions in that space of doing educational research with young people, and to help and strengthen participants' sense of agency or being able to take action, and as well as increasing their awareness of belonging. So all these reasons made an arts-based method appropriate for this particular project. We've also seen in prior research that there's an increasing focus on utilizing arts-based and creative methods. This has been seen in environmental education and children's, where explorations have been done around children's relationships with and perceptions of the natural environment, which actually is a part of positive peace in the eco-minded component of positive peace. We've also seen arts-based approaches used for assessments of children's comprehension. We've seen children's experiences of schooling and their expectations of schooling expressed in an arts-based way. This actually came forward in the national discussion recently in Scotland, where young people were providing pictures and frames and snaps and Instagram chat information to respond to a national discussion about the curriculum and what they wanted to see. So even within those formal spaces, we're seeing the arts-based methods increasing. Children's conceptualizations of happiness and fear are often best captured in these ways. And art can support young children and youth who have explicitly experienced war. We find these methods are often used in that space of working with those who have refugee and status and those who might be considered immigrant children. We also see how children and young people view peace and war has been explored using these particular methods. And that made it a fitting way to approach our study. So our study was involved here in Glasgow. So we'll situate our context first with the fact that Glasgow is actually considered the least peaceful place in the United Kingdom. So while the United Kingdom actually has a very high overall score of positive peace, ranking 18th in the world, the past years have actually seen a marked depreciation in what we consider a peaceful space. And we've seen that here in Glasgow in particular around grievances between groups and exclusion based on socioeconomic scales. We see rule of law and freedoms of press actually being suppressed in a different way in the last number of years, and level of trust in the government as being reduced in the United Kingdom. And those are all affecting some of those scores. And it's really interesting to think about this in the space of Glasgow, because in addition to defining peace as really the absence of violence or fear of violence, that's where we see Glasgow actually being rated quite low as one of the least peaceful urban centers. And this is mostly due, primarily due to gang violence and knife crime and these inequalities that we experience here in the city due to health inequalities. So really at a micro level, many young people in the UK, including those here in Scotland, are actually spending time in schools, in homes and in the community in ways that they're actually seeing and engaging with spaces that are not necessarily peaceful. We also have the recent report that came out around what's happening with violence in schools, where nearly 70% of teachers were reporting here in Scotland that they were experiencing some kind of violence or aggression, be that physical or verbal, in schools. So especially at the primary level, which is an interesting finding that was revealed just last November. So our aims and specific research questions really to be able to support young people's learning about peace and conflict, to understand how they conceptualize peace, and in particular positive peace, and to explore what kind of commitment to peace building that they thought they could make based on their knowledge. So our specific questions were to, again, explore how they express their understanding of peace, the kinds of contributions that they would like to make, and if there were differences or similarities in the conceptualizations of youth in our study that were from two different socioeconomic and geographical backgrounds. The study itself was founded on critical peace education as a conceptualizing framework, and really this was wanting to pay attention to those local realities and local conceptions of peace, again situated within the city of Glasgow, and focusing on local youth voice and perspectives. This really then looked towards those space and tools to reflect on how just and peaceful communities actually are, and ways that young people can make that contribution. This study was actually organized then in a constructivist approach, where we really wanted youth to be active participants in the process, where there were not necessarily any right or wrong answers, because we were looking for their perceptions, and different and unique circumstances would come forward. And we wanted their experiences and interests to be at the heart of the construction of understanding and expressing what they conceptualized as peace. So we had 59 young people from 3 different schools that came in to participate in the study. And these particular schools actually reflected 3 of the different schools here in Glasgow, which were the state school, which was Roman Catholic, a state school that was non-denominational, and an independent school. And so together these students then came into 4 different workshops, and these were students that were throughout the secondary level. So here in Glasgow, that would be S1 or secondary level 1 up through secondary level 5. So again, these schools were reflective of 2 distinct parts of the city. This map actually shows you the social and economic deprivation scales here in Glasgow, and if the color red is appearing, that's a higher degree of social or economic deprivation. And if you're seeing blue or those light shades of blue, those are actually areas that would be considered in less deprivation. And so one of these schools was actually located then in an area of high deprivation, the independent school, and the Roman Catholic school then were not. So through the participation of these particular participants at these schools located within these areas of deprivation, we then moved to designing a workshop session. The sessions themselves were 2 hours long, and were involved in 3 different steps: the Peace Data Walk, the Arts-Based Workshop, and the Peace Wall. And I'll explain each of those 3 steps with some exemplars as well. So in that Peace Data Walk, we first had students engage in some prior knowledge building and to situate what they knew. So there were a number of posters that were in response to global, national, and local issues of peace and justice. And students were actually asked to walk through and experience each of those particular posters, to take notes and talk with each other. And both of us were available then if questions did arise, that we'd be able to address those on the spot. And so you see an example there of Yulia in one of the schools that we worked in, and the example of how students would then move through each of those stations to develop a prior knowledge and working knowledge of what was meant by positive peace and where Glasgow was situated within that peace index. The next part of the workshop was to move into a space where our pupils could respond. And so you see an example here of the setup of one of the rooms for one of the workshops, the materials that were then provided for pupils to be able to take an arts-based approach. And again, a number of options for selection based on what they desire to use for materials. So in that space, the step 2 was in the drawing or the response. And so the question was posed, what does peace mean to you in your environment? The materials, as you saw there, were provided in the space of paints, pastels, felt tip pens, colored pencils, markers, and papers. And they were able to actually then take their reflective notes and their graphic organizers from the peace walk to then move into the space of independent drawing. And as pupils were sitting there together, they were having chats and making decisions collectively. And because we really wanted to focus on the arts-based component in this particular study, we did not record, we did not write down the things that they were talking about. We made that conscious decision to rely on the arts-based approach in this space. And so again, different studies have been designed in different ways, but we really wanted to stay focused around those art-based methods. So those graphic organizers then were available for pupils to be able to take some of those notes and move forward into the space of drawing. Step 3 of the workshop design process was then the peace reflection wall, which, following in a similar manner to what the Canadian Museum of Human Rights actually asked individuals to do at the end of experiencing a session, we asked the question, we asked students to actually put on the wall, what we called the peace wall, a reflection. And we gave them a number of prompts. Peace is, I take a stand for, or I imagine the world, and then they actually placed those up together as one of their statements of the actions that they would take. And now I'll turn over to Yulia, who will move us into considering the analysis process and the results and the findings.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I will just walk you through the analysis. Oh, do you want me to open my?
It's up to you. I can continue on if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that would be great, Sarah. Thank you very much for this.
Of course.
Great. So the next slide, please. And then the next. Okay, so I just the next one. Thank you. So I would like you to look at this picture that one of our participants drew. And how would you interpret this? So if you could just, share a few words in the chat. So what comes to mind when you look at it? Remember, the question that we asked them to answer is, what does peace mean in your environment? So what kind of words come to your mind now when you look at this image? I'm just going to give you a minute. Unity, love and companion, harmony, united, being united even though different, collaborate. This is brilliant. Thank you so much. It's very helpful to see because I think it actually shows how similar we analyzed it. Looking at the picture, a desire for belonging and harmony. I see someone concerned by interracial ideas. The image is full of nature, harmony. This is perfect. Yes, thank you so much. Nature. Okay, thank you all. Touchable. Oh, that's very interesting. So, Sarah, if you can move to the next slide, please. Togetherness in one space. Great. Okay, so I will show you how we analyzed it. So I will show you an example later of how we analyze peaceful reflections, but just to make a note that we use thematic analysis for that. And for drawings and paintings, there's so many different ways to analyze drawings, right? So we took 3 different ones and we sort of combined them together and chose the elements that were particularly important for our study. So we took child-centered personal meaning mapping methodology, visual content analytic procedures, and visual art coding scheme. Next one. So basically, we put them all together. Some of them overlap, some of them are very distinct. So there's so many different elements to analyze. We decided that not all of them worked for us. So in red, you can see the ones that we chose specifically, right? So you can see that we focus on subject matter, themes, visual elements, mastery and tone. We actually also analyzed symbolism, but we removed it later, but I will still show you how we analyze that particular element. Next one, Sarah. Thank you. So just to show you what this different elements mean. I'm not going to over-focus on this, but you can see theme basically is primary message. So there are different examples that these methodologies provide. Focus on main subject, which is brief description of the subject of the piece, breadth of themes, so the quantity of these themes, visual elements. So we looked at different setting, people, non-human living and living elements, activity and time. We looked at the tone or the mood, the disposition of each imagery, and mastery. So for mastery, you basically choose to look at how young people understood the issues of peace and justice, right? And for this in particular, we use elements of positive peace. So Sarah mentioned the PECA project that we looked at. So this is basically peace education curriculum analysis that was first developed by Standish and Joyce and other colleagues. So you can see that Scotland did quite well in curriculum analysis. So it's C+, it's one of the better performing countries. And next slide, please. So here you can see what this analysis or methodology actually suggests to analyze. So it's how nonviolent conflict transformation is represented in the curriculum, whether violence or different types of violence are recognized, and 9 elements of positive peace. So we only focus on these 9 elements. So we wanted to see whether young people actually represented those in their imagery. So you can see here it's peace zone, peace bond. Can you please come back? Thank you. Peace bond, social justice, eco mind, link mind, so interconnectivity and interdependency, gender mind, resilience, well-being, and prevention. Next one. Thank you. So I'll show you how we analyze this image that I ask you to sort of quickly analyze. Next slide. Thank you. So this was from what we use pseudonyms here, of course. So it's from Minch Academy. So it was done by a student between 16 and 18 years old. So the themes that we identified here, first is relationships, second identity, and third is race. So the main subject matter for us, 2 hands of people of different color holding each other. We see 3 themes here. We identified visual elements, the setting, people, living elements, activity, and time. We thought that the tone here was quite serene, you know, just 2 people holding hands, and there's no really action except for this. And we kind of, the symbolism here that we found, we thought, you know, it's people of different races embracing each other, living together in peace despite their differences. And then the mastery, we thought we identified 4 different elements of positive peace here. Peace zone, which is a safe environment, peace bond, relationships between people, social justice. So, you know, here by social justice, we would understand anti-racism, for example, and eco mind. So because we see nature here. The next one, Sarah. Thank you. So we also wanted to give you another example. It's from the same school, 17-year-old child. So we see here not only images now, but also words. And because of that, we also identified more positive peace elements here. So if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So here we can see 4 different themes. We see communication and discussion, safety, school and education, and equality. So there are varied images here. We see tree with the word communication. We see earth as global discussion. We see school for education, equality between different people, and of course, safety. The tone that we identified here is hopeful because, you know, it talks about basically, you know, all this hope for equality, hope for communication, hope for safety, and so on. And we kind of, in symbolism, we saw here key pillars of peace: equality, discussion, education, and safety. For us, it did meet the criteria of positive peace because we have 8 different elements here: peace zone, peace bond, social justice, eco mind, link mind, gender mind, and well-being and prevention. So this was one of the few images that actually focus on prevention, for example. Next slide, please. And then, so we did analyze it through positive peace elements, but we also wanted to look more broadly at the different themes that we identified before actually looking at what positive peace elements each image represented. And then we kind of found, so we basically analyzed it thematically to looking at, you know, codes, sub-theme and themes, and we see, you know, a few different themes, big themes here: social justice, as one, concepts, places, things, and activities. And we see which of these sub-themes are represented more. And there was a lot of representation of relationships, for example, nature, of course, but also we see quite a few examples of representations of race and anti-racism or interracial relationships and identity. And we found different representations of identity, whether it's religious identity or Scottish identity or LGBTQI plus identity. So you can see a lot of different examples here, but I would like to move to the next slide. Thank you. And here we just basically put it all together to look at positive peace elements in particular. So we can see that peace zone is really well represented. And just to remind you, peace zone is about, safe environment. We see some good representation of peace bonds. So it's relationships between different people. Eco-mind, of course, it was interesting to see eco-mind because as the next slide will show you, it's not here yet, but I will explain why it was interesting to see that in a moment. But, okay, thank you, Sarah. So if you can see here, it's Standish and Joy's analysis of the curriculum in Scotland on the left. And on the right, you can see our analysis of these elements of peace in images. So in their analysis of the curriculum, there's a lot of focus on well-being. So it's basically, you can see it's in a way overpowered because there's so much representation of that, which is really important, of course. And there's a little bit of representation of peace bond, social justice, resilience, and peace zone. Whereas in our research, we found a lot of focus on peace zone and the environment. And this is particularly because Scotland, since implementing the curriculum for excellence, Scotland also implemented learning for sustainability with a lot of focus on environmental sustainability. But we still see a lot of focus from young people on well-being, on peace bond, on social justice, link mind, and a little bit less, but still present, prevention, resilience, and gender mind. If you can go back to the previous slide, Sarah, please. Thank you. So I just want to briefly show you what we found from the contributions to the peace wall reflections. So we basically analyzed it thematically. We looked at codes, we looked at sub-themes, and then we came up with themes. So some of this you can see, like peace zone, for example, it aligns with the positive peace elements, but the others, they're a little bit different. So we also identify rights-based representations, diversity, interpersonal, and prevention. So here we see a lot of young people focusing on, creating culture of nonviolence. So there's a lot of commitments that they wanted to make to building peace in their communities by basically addressing the violence that exists. And they didn't only focus on violence as direct violence, as, physical violence, but also the structural and cultural barriers. They focus a lot on achieving equality as their commitment to peace, respecting everyone. So we saw quite a lot of, representations of, that we need to respect everyone regardless of their background. There's quite a lot of focus on, commitment to ensuring that everyone is happy and everyone is calm and tranquil and so on. So you can see some of the examples here. And Sarah, if you can please move to the next slide. So I'm just going to go through 3 learnings that we have from this project. So the first one is, if you're familiar with Hilary Kremen's work, she's professor at the University of Cambridge. In one of her articles, she identified that peace education research has this crisis of praxis. So she basically advocates for ensuring congruence with peace values, demonstrating reflexivity, and impacting the lives of participants when we are conducting peace education research or peace research more generally. So here we believe that our project actually helped us to contribute to this issue in particular. So the way we gathered data, we captured data, the way we analyzed it, we think that it helped us to rethink this whole approach of how we engage with young people, children, and how we conduct peace education research. We focus more on the process. Of course, outcomes were very important, but we were very sensitive to the process of capturing data. We focus on sort of shifting from adult ways of understanding that children may not feel familiar with or may not feel comfortable with. So we kind of created this space of creative expression they could use drawing and express themselves and make meaning of their world through that. And, in line with Alice and Bochner's research, we also kind of wanted to bring this honesty and a sense of emotional reliability through this format to see how young people can sort of construct this or identify these possible ways of living in peace. Next one. So learning 2 for us is aligning our research with democratic values. And as Sarah talked about critical peace education, it focuses a lot on, giving agency and supporting agency development in young people and hearing local voice. So this is what we wanted to do. And we believe that this structured approach actually helped us and allowed students to understand peace and positive peace more comprehensively, to express what it means to them, and to also see themselves as agents of change. So we see this process as this, this transformative inquiry towards social change. So this gave them an opportunity to reflect, to commit to social action in the space of positive peace. And we believe that it actually did have an impact on the lives of young people we engaged with. And for us, it was also important to create this space for the voice of young people, for them to express themselves and tell their stories. So we saw them as knowers, as someone who can actually bring a lot to the table to contribute to the conversation on peace building in their community. And we saw ourselves as learners. So we thought we could learn a lot from young people. Next one. And the last learning is basically, about normative validity. So we wanted to go away from what Bista calls pseudo-security of numbers and, all these conversations about content validity, external, internal validity, and so on. We kind of wanted to focus on normative validity, which basically means whether what we study represents what we actually value. And we think that, focusing on representations of what young people value in relation to peace and peace education, what they find desirable in terms of building peace in their communities and the society at large, or what they think the world actually ought to be. We believe that we managed to achieve this normative validity in our study. And the next slide, just to identify a few limitations. It is a small group of participants. It's 59 students. It's only 3 schools, although as Sarah said, they, represent 3 different types of school in Scotland or in Glasgow. It's still really important to capture voices of other young people, especially in more deprived areas. We did realize that these activities would really benefit from further focus groups and interviews with young people to talk more in depth about their imagery and why they chose particular elements of positive peace in particular. We were trying to analyze the notes the students completed while they were doing the peace walk, peace data walk, I'm sorry, but we just couldn't understand their handwriting, unfortunately. And another thing that also Sarah mentioned, that we didn't take notes of their discussions while they were drawing and painting. We overhear quite a little bit of their conversations, which was really fascinating, but we didn't make notes, and we thought that it would also be beneficial. But yes, this is basically it. And there are some references that we recommend, and it's on the next slide. And yes, thank you so much.